All right, I'm Vlad. I'm super excited to be here with Linda Lian, who's co-founder and CEO of Common Room.
Hey
Let's hear
everyone.
it.
So great to be here.
Yeah, so we only have 20 minutes, so I think we should dive right in. And I want to actually bring it back all the way to the beginning, even before Common Room. Like, did you always know you wanted to become an entrepreneur? Like, where does that passion come from?
Yeah, I mean, I think my earliest memory that was entrepreneurial was in middle school. There was a rage going around with making lizards out of beads. If anyone lived through the mid-2000s, you would remember this. But I remember I would just be making them in class. You know, I had this thing where I was deeply anxious about my grades and like very studious, but I liked to like pretend that I didn't pay attention in class. And I would be like making these lizards to try to, you know, be a rebel. And this girl turned around one day and she was kind of part of the popular crew and she was like, "Can I have one of those? I'll pay you." And it was just this incredible moment for me of awakening. I've never been so excited. I think I made like 20 bead lizards.
I was going to ask, what did you charge
last week? I think it was like 50 cents.
Nice.
I was at a loss.
Okay.
Yeah, the margins weren't good.
Yeah.
But I think ever since then, you know, building businesses, creating that customer value, that delight, feeling like I had some control over being able to give someone something valuable, I think that's been a core driver of, you know, my whole life. In high school, you know, I started a company, and I think, yeah, I do think that to some extent that entrepreneurial desire was always there.
Yeah, totally. And one thing actually, when we first met, like one area that we're really connected on was the fact that we're both immigrants, right? I was born in Vilnius, Lithuania, immigrated to the United States when I was 9. You were born in China, you immigrated to the US when you were 5. And, you know, for me, like, being an immigrant was always a double-edged sword. And there was this moment where I realized I can do a lot with very little, but then at the same time, I placed these, like, crazy expectations on myself my entire life.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious maybe to hear a little bit more about your journey and whether, you know, being an immigrant has impacted your career.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think being an immigrant inherently, you internalize what it means to be an outsider, because that is really your earliest memories is, you know, not being entirely comfortable in kind of where you're growing up. And I think that concept of being an outsider is so beneficial to entrepreneurship. You know, my immigrant story is not special. Like, I think that's what's so powerful about it. You know, I think before I started a company, I saw the myth of all these founders who had succeeded before me, and I think Silicon Valley has a tendency to mythologize successful founders, and it almost feels inaccessible. Like they have something I don't, that they're special in some way, that Steve Jobs, you know, had some joie de vivre or some aspect that I would never be. But now being on the other side, you know, and having been an immigrant, it's like, yeah, like my grandparents brought me up until I was 5. They sent me on a plane to, you know, meet my parents who are already in the US. They were going to school. I showed up at the airport with like photographs of my parents, you know, looking for them, because we didn't have Skype back then, and I didn't really even know what they look like anymore. And I remember, you know, being in ESL, but what's so powerful is so many Asian Americans and Chinese Americans have come up to me and said, that is exactly my experience, you know, immigrating to America. And I'm also willing to bet that there's even people in the audience who, you know, have an immigration story like that. And I'm sitting here as a founder, backed by Index, telling you that I am not special. That, you know, if you want to start a company and you feel like you're an outsider and you feel like you have a chip on your shoulder, like lean into that, because that's exactly what creates grit and it creates that drive. And now, like, as we're building and scaling out our team, we look for that drive, that grit, that chip on your shoulder, that outsider mentality. And I really do think that's where kind of innovation like starts.
Totally. Well, and I feel like almost every immigrant has like a parent story. Like I would love to just maybe, what about your parents? Like,
Yeah.
what was that like meeting them there, like
Yeah.
in the US? And have they maybe given you some advice that you like stay true to this day? Like, tell me more about them.
You know, my parents were like very unconventional. They were very entrepreneurial. Like my mom was
Yeah.
always starting some business or another, whether it was like she had a stand at the mall where she would screen print, you know, T-shirts for people who were walking by at the mall. You know, she started various businesses. My dad was always like thinking about business ideas. And I think that what they instilled in me is like, what I really internalized is that like good can always be better.
Yeah.
And I think that the pessimist, you know, would say, wow, that's so sad. It's like the Boston Dynamics robot where, you know, he's finally picked up the
Totally.
box and the person like moves the box and, you know, the goalpost is always moving. You're never good enough. I think that's the pessimistic interpretation. I think the optimistic one is like, you're never done learning, that like good can always be better, that you don't know everything and you never will. And I think for me, how that manifests in my day-to-day is this like deep realization that what got you to good may not get you to better. And Vlad, you and I talk about this, you know, you hyperscaled Airbnb during a time of chaos. And we talk about, you know, what it means to learn to be a leader. And a lot of times being an incredible individual contributor, having that grit, you know, doing the homework
Yeah.
isn't what's gonna make you a great leader. And so like you hit the ceiling where you're like, wow, I'm good now, but I need to be better.
Yep.
And that gap, it's not the same thing you were doing before. You have to do things differently. And I think that discomfort and that learning
Totally.
is like what drives and what my parents like internalized in me.
Yeah, and I mean, working at a startup, all the way through, there's so much discomfort all the time. There's always chaos, and like that's just so true. You just have to keep reinventing yourself, right? Over and over again, because your world just basically changes every 3 to 6 months. You're a different person, or the startup expects you to be a
Yes.
different person every 3 to 6 months. So
Yes.
that's an amazing lesson that they've taught you. So let's go forward in time a little bit to Common Room. What is Common Room?
So Common Room is a customer intelligence platform, and it is a philosophy around helping modern SaaS businesses meet their buyers where they are. So at a very tactical level, right? When you're getting your startup off the ground, are you starting a community? Are you joining the conversation with your future users on places like social media or in digital watering holes where they already like to convene and have conversations? Are you, you know, doing modern best practices of having a free trial experience where someone can try before they buy, right? This is all part of the modern kind of customer intelligence or intelligent go-to-market philosophy. And we work with startups from the earliest stages of conception to, you know, the OpenAIs and AWSs and, you know, Snowflakes of the world. But all of these organizations, large and small, the fundamental truth is they have to identify the people that matter to them. They have to go find the prospective buyers they don't already know about. They have to use AI to figure out who these individuals are, and then they use AI and automations to then go and build relationships, right? Whether that's prioritizing the set of folks that you really want to go and spend a ton of time with and do deep relationship building, or it's, you know, automating a certain workflow to get an answer to that customer faster. So we power go-to-market execution for all of these various companies.
Super cool. And actually, so when I first joined Index, I was like, okay, I got to meet the best founders in our portfolio. And your name kept coming up over and over and over and over again. And there was this one story that really stood out to me was how you went about recruiting your co-founders. Could you share a little bit? I would love to unpack it with you a bit.
Yeah.
That's something that a lot of people struggle with.
Totally. So I have a jack of all trades, master of none background. I've been in finance. I was a product marketing manager. I was a product manager, but I was never an engineer and I was never a product designer, right? Like you could consider me a non-technical person. And I think when you start a company, it's really important to take a good look at yourself and say, hey, what are my strengths? What am I uniquely good at that nobody else could do? What am I not good at? And for me, I realized that I was really good at positioning and marketing and selling and engaging with customers, but I needed a really strong team to go and build that software. And so the first thing I did, and thank you Index for having that faith in me, but the first thing I did after I raised my seed round was to put together my founding team. And it was just me. I had an idea. I had a notebook where I had scribbled some squares that were supposed to be the user experience of our app. And I spent every single day for probably 2 months straight. That's 8 hours a day, right? 5 days a week for 2 whole months, just trying to recruit my founding team. And that included cold outbounding on LinkedIn to many people whose profiles I thought, kind of looked like the right thing. And it comes back to really understanding who you want to bring on and why. So if you've ever cold outbounded to someone, having a very personalized and contextual message is important. And so when I hired my design co-founder, Francis, or when I brought him onto the team, he has an incredible background, right? He was the 10th product designer at Facebook. He was there for over 10 years. He invented Newsfeed. By all means, he was massively overqualified and way better than anyone I could conceivably bring on when I only had a notebook with some rectangles in it. And it was just about, I reached out to him, I said, hey, here are all the reasons why I think you're uniquely an incredible fit. Will you just talk to me? No response.
Yeah, I was wondering, how long did it take?
No response.
Yeah.
But I just knew, I was like, if I could only get him to talk to me, I know we would have a great conversation. And so when I first reached out to him, I hadn't quit my job yet, right? I was like, hey, I have a startup idea, but I'm working at AWS. And then I quit my job. I updated him, no response. I'm just messaging people into the void right now on LinkedIn. I kept going. I got some design partners. I started getting, customers interested to give me some of their time. I messaged him, I would give him an update, and finally he's like, okay, let's meet.
But the 50th time, he's like, all right, I'll give you a shot.
Yeah, and it happened very quickly after that. It was just such an alignment in kind of vision and personality. And I found my engineering co-founder, Viraj, who's my CTO and really my right-hand man, found him the exact same way, cold outbounding on LinkedIn because I felt like he had such a great profile. And it also took multiple times of reaching out to get him to talk to me.
That's awesome. And so if you zoom out, is there any kind of advice that you would want to give a first-time entrepreneur, maybe somebody non-technical who's looking, has a crazy idea, but needs to figure out co-founders?
Yeah, I think so. I describe these moments of realization as you're building a company as almost like secrets. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but you understand things in a way that you're like, oh, that's how it's done. I think secret number one for founders is talk about your idea.
Yeah.
I think so many founders like to keep it close to the vest. Even with investors, they're kind of cagey because you found something precious. You have an incredible idea. But, I think the false, the trap is to get all my precious about it. In fact, the counterintuitive thing is what you have to challenge yourself to do, which is to literally talk to everybody about your idea. And so for those first 2 months, that's what I did. And people would say, hey, I'm not, that's a cool idea. I don't really know what I can add to it, but I know somebody who's looking for a new job. And it's through just pounding the pavement and telling everyone about your idea that you will make progress, but it starts from opening up.
I love that. I also love the way you're calling it a secret because it's one of those things where it's so non-obvious, and almost nobody knows about it. Once it hits and it starts clicking, you're like, oh my God, this is so the right way to go. So you hired a team, and then it was time to build stuff and try to figure out product market fit. In those early days, how did that go?
Man, product market fit, if you guys have heard the term, it's this mythical thing that you have to find. And, investors will ask you, do you have it? And people you want to hire, they'll be like, do you have product market fit? And you're like, do I have it? What is it? And, I'll tell you another moment that was like a secret.
Yeah.
So we had just launched our product and we had built it over 18 months. So, working with these design partners, we had launched it, it was generally available. We expected the order forms to be falling out of the sky. They weren't. And I was talking to Jason Citron, the CEO and founder of Discord, at one of Index's retreats. And he's like, yeah, how's it going? And I was like, man, I think we're 2 quarters into selling our first product. And I'm just like, I'm grinding away on deals. Like, I'm outbounding every day on LinkedIn, trying to get customers. I'm deep in the tactical execution and we're barely making our quarter. Like we're like literally landing on the number that we set for ourselves through like massive efforts of feats of heroism, right? Like I'm like out there pounding the pavement. And I was like, dang, what am I missing? And he's like, well, you don't have product market fit. He was like, it shouldn't be this hard. And I was asking my team to be perfect. I was like, yeah, our execution has just got to be meticulous. Like, we don't have any room. Like, everything has to be perfect. There was no chaos. Like, this session is called Scaling Through Chaos. There was no chaos at Common Room. Everyone was like executing like by the book, and we were barely making our number. And he was like, yeah, like you're not doing your job. Your job as a founder and a CEO is to go find that accelerator. It's to generate a condition of chaos. It's to make sure that your product is meeting a pain that's so visceral and real for your customers that they're literally pounding down your door to get it. And if you're not there, you don't have it. And that was that was a secret. Like, I took that secret home and I was like, I need to do better at my job.
Yeah, it's crazy because even when you think you find product market fit, the world changes, right?
Yes.
And then you're back on this journey. I was like, is this right? Do I have to adjust something? I mean, at Airbnb, we actually had, because things were changing so much all the time, even after we thought we had product market fit, we even needed to have this core value, embrace the adventure, which basically symbolized the fact that, hey, the world is constantly changing. There's going to be chaos. Chaos is actually good, and it's our job to embrace that chaos because that's when creativity comes into play, right? I mean, I'd love, like, after you've already found product market fit, are there any other moments of chaos that you've had or still continue to have that you can just share?
So many.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest learnings I've had is the macro is everything, and like the macro changes the rules of your game. And you have to respond to it as quickly as possible. What I mean by that is, we got our seed round in the day that the markets shut down due to the first COVID wave. It was a terrifying day. Our lawyers were like, did you get the money in the bank? Like, everything's shutting down, they're gonna pull out. And I was like, oh my God, get the money in the bank. And like that completely flipped the script on how we were going to build the company. Like, we were all remote. I had to find a founding team remotely. We had no brand. I was sitting on Zoom all day, and the game changed. Like, the way that you recruited changed. The types of people you could recruit changed. If you still wanted to play the game by whatever preconceived assumption or notion, you wouldn't have succeeded. I think it's similar in that now, I think, the macro favors things like efficiency or profitability. But during that time of low interest rates and hypergrowth, if you had been focused on efficiency and profitability, you would have done the wrong thing, right? And so I think everything is kind of within the confines of the moment.
Yeah. I mean, it also just takes a lot of courage to say, like, everything has just changed, and all this comfort around routines and your strategy and like what everyone's working on, you suddenly just need to go, we were going here and now we got to go here. I mean, it takes a lot of
deeply uncomfortable moments.
Oh my God, yeah. So we're actually a bit low on time, and so for maybe some parting words of wisdom that you can share with first-time founders.
Truth. Be a truth seeker. customers will lie to you, right? I mean, look, they'll give you their time and you're like, hey, do you want to pay for this? And they're like, no, right? Your team, it's not like they're lying on purpose, but your job as a founder is to be deeply, uncomfortably honest with yourself and say, hey, are we solving a real problem? Is it really deeply painful for someone? Is it big enough?
Yeah.
Can it be big enough? And if those answers, aren't there, then you got to do what Jason told me, which is got to go back to the drawing board and you got to find it.
Linda, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to keep partnering with you and for all the things you're going to do in the future. Thank you to everyone for coming, and thank you, Startup Grind.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.